everyone. Thank you for being here again on my podcast and my YouTube channel. Today we have with us Josephine Hallam. I had to ask her
Hallam,
how
yep.
Hallam. See, I had to ask her how to pronounce, and I still did it wrong, but that's
That's
okay.
fine.
She contacted me through my podcast and she sent me an email. She went to my website and sent me an email because she finds that her story is worth sharing, especially for parents. So I think this would be valuable, very, very important for parents to listen to what she has to say. She had to go through, and I'm really sorry about that, Josephine, a very traumatic experience as a child by witnessing her father's suicide. And this is what we're going to talk about today. I want to start first. Let's not go back to the past now, Josephine, but first, can you just introduce yourself and what you're doing today? Because I know you're very successful, and just tell us what you do.
So, my name's Josephine Hallam, and I am currently a criminal defense attorney in Phoenix, Arizona. So, I represent the highest level felonies, murders, sex crimes. I have three beautiful children and supportive husband, and I hope I'm living a healthy, positive life. So that's what I'm doing now.
Well, and we know from what she actually wrote me a very long email with some information about what happened to her as a child and how I remember the one word you used and how it defined you for so long. So let's go and meet that child now, 7 years old, right? That's what happened.
At
If
10,
you want
it's
10,
10.
if
Yeah.
you want to give us a little bit of background on your family and what was going on at the time.
So I think first I'm going to tell you what my experience was as that child, because the mind frame of a child who has no frame of reference for what's happening is important for people to understand, especially parents. And then I'll go back and kind of fill in what I learned later. But when this happened, it was 1978, and I lived with my parents. My father was actually a child psychiatrist who was head of psychiatry at our local hospital. My mom was a psychiatric social worker. I had an older brother and sister. On this day, it was about a week before we were about to go on our family vacation that we did yearly. And my mother had taken my older brother. My brother is 7 years older, and my sister is 5 years older. And my mother had taken them to our country club and left me alone in the house with my father. I did not know anything really about what was going on in the house or his state of mind. I knew there was friction in the house and some drinking in the house, but I had no idea what was about to happen. So I was upstairs. We had a kind of 3-story house, and my father's the master bedroom was right next to my bedroom. I had at the time went into my sister's room and taken her Grease album to listen to it while she was gone, and feeling very guilty about the theft of that album. And I heard my father coming down the stairs from the 3rd floor, which was my brother's bedroom. And I right away I was like, why would he be coming down? He was wearing an undershirt and his boxer shorts, but he had one hand behind his back.
Mm.
And he was coming down. Hey, Daddy, what are you doing up there? Oh, nothing. I just had to put something away. And in my mind, at that point, I thought my brother had Playboys and that my father had gone upstairs to get a Playboy magazine. So that's what's processing through in my mind at that point. My father came down the stairs and went into his room. He was in there a couple minutes. I went back in my room, and then he called me and said, hey, Jody, come in here. My nickname's Jody. Uh, and then he gave me a message. He gave me a message for people, different messages for people that I was to tell people. And at that point, I was like, well, like, it didn't make any sense. And he kept saying, promise me you'll tell them. I was like, okay, I don't get this. Didn't click in my mind anything. Um, then I was, I left the room again. And I have to say, in my child's mind, at that moment, the only way I knew you could commit suicide was slashing your wrists. That's all I knew in my experience as a child. I just, I thought that's how people kill themselves, that they slash their wrists.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I knew he was hurt because I saw blood. I thought he had
Yeah.
cut himself in a round circle with
Sure.
even though I'd seen it happen, it didn't
No.
process.
It's too much
So
for a child. Yeah.
yeah, and the moaning, and then I'm like, okay, I see blood. I hear moaning from him, and he wasn't responding and saying when I said daddy. So I thought I was alone in the house because my mom had left. So I went down the stairway, and I remember there was a mirror at the end of the stairway right before you turn. And I saw myself, and I remember in that instant thinking, your life has changed completely.
Really,
Like,
you already had that feeling that
yeah, I
it
knew
will
it
not
was
be the
that
same.
moment.
Yeah.
It was all, I didn't know what that meant to myself, but I instinctually knew this is something that changes everything. And
Mm-hmm.
so I turned the corner and I actually heard my mom's voice. She had come in and picked up the phone that was ringing. And I ran up to her, and all I could get out is, "There's blood on daddy. There's blood on daddy." That's all I that's all I said.
Wow.
I said it like 3 times. So my mother was being polite and like said, "Okay, whoever, I have to go." And she looked at me and said, "What?" I said, "There's blood on daddy." She went then and went upstairs. I just sat on one of the stairs because I was like, should I
Mm-hmm.
go back up and be with her? I don't really want to go back up there.
Of
Like,
course,
what
yeah.
do I do? I sat on the stair and I heard my mom say, "What did you do, Maria? What did you do? What have you done?" She
Mm.
then came down the stairway, kind of went past me, and then went out the front door. Just ran out the front door.
And you
I'm
stayed in the house,
just
yeah.
sitting there, the mirror's in front of me. I'm on the staircase, and I'm like, should I go up and sit with him and hold his hand? Like, I'm assuming they're calling a doctor. The next door neighbor is a psychiatrist also, so maybe they were going to get him. And I didn't physically know what to do. So then I kind of went and opened the door, and I was looking around. I didn't know where she went. I it was a very surreal experience, and I felt
Yeah.
very torn between going back up to him to be with him and following my mother, and her instinct was to flee. And I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't understand why she wasn't calling 911. And I'm thinking, should I call 911? Like, should I do that? I don't know what's
Mm-hmm.
happening. So at that point, one of my neighbors came out of their house, Mrs. Anderson, who is married to Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Anderson. And she came up and she said, "Jody, come with me, come with me." And I was like, oh, okay. So I went next door to the Andersons, and there was a lot of hubbub going on. And they put me in a living room, and
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting there, and I'm just sitting alone in the living room, and heard I heard sirens, and I saw a police car pull up, and right away I knew they were going to arrest me. They were
Wow,
absolutely
you thought you
going to
were
arrest
you were guilty of that. You did
me.
it.
Absolutely. I was alone in the house
Wow.
with him. There was a gun. He's hurt. I'm the prime suspect. I'd stolen my sister's record. They're going to find that.
The association you made, you see, just the record and your father's death.
Yeah.
Wow.
And That's how a child's brain works. So police come when there's a crime. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so then I'm worried, like, should I hide? Should I run? Am I going to get arrested? What do they do with kids? Um, then I got called in to speak to adults, and they started asking me, Jody, what happened? What happened?
Mm.
And I was just like, I think daddy's hurt. He has blood on him. And they said, did he say anything to you?
Mm. The messages. Do you remember them? Did you remember then what the messages
I
were?
did. And I lied because
You
the
did.
messages were not so nice to some people.
Oh,
Um, yeah. So I'm going to cry. But
it's okay.
so my instinct was to protect my mom
Of course. Yeah.
and kind of protect my siblings that he wasn't nice to. So I lied and I said, yeah, he called me in. He just said he loves us all and, he loves us so much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've never spoken about what he really said. But
And you don't
anyway,
have, and you don't have to, Josephine. You don't have to.
yeah. So
But it
at that,
does say a lot about who you are, even as a child.
it's odd to me that kicked in right away, that
Mm.
I felt this need to protect. I still didn't know what was going on. Um, at that point, a priest walked in. It was our priest from our church. He smelled of cigar smoke or pipe
Mm.
smoke, I remember. And my brother walked in, who was 17, and he said, I want to see him. I want to see him. And I got very adamant. I said, you don't want to see him. Do not go over there. And I
Mm-hmm.
begged him not to go see the body. Um, I was relieved when I looked out and saw the body going um, to the ambulance, and he wasn't covered like a dead person. Like
Mm-hmm.
they, so I was like, oh, he's alive. Like they're going to go do surgery on him, and
Mm-hmm.
I, I didn't know. So then at some point, we all went back over to my house. I was very confused about upstairs because I knew there was a lot of blood. Um, I didn't know what I should be doing. And then a lot of phone calls started to be made. People started to show up. Um, I still don't understand what happened. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I went up to my mom and I said, can I go see if Allison across the street wants to go bike riding? And I'm sure my mom
Mm.
was like, huh? But I don't know. That's what it came to.
No.
And she's
Oh,
like,
yeah,
okay,
kids at in moments like that, you need
yeah,
an adult to take over and talk to you, right?
yeah. And I was a pretty happy, self-sufficient kid, but
Mm.
I walked across the street, walked up, rang the doorbell. Mrs. Black answered and said, oh, Jody, I'm so sorry about your father. And I, first of all, didn't know how she knew already. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, well, they're fixing him at the hospital. Like, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I said, is Allison here? Can I go bike riding? So we went bike riding. And I remember stopping and looking at her and saying, do you think my dad just died? She's like, I don't know. I was like, I wonder, I wonder if he died. And that was kind of
Wow.
it. So we bike rode back to the house. Then later on, nobody knew what to do with me. First of all, because
Mm-hmm.
at some point my mom came to me and said, your dad had something in his mind that was sick. It was like
Mm.
a cancer, and it hurt so much he couldn't stand the pain anymore. And I said something like, is that why he cut himself with a razor?
Mm.
And, I'd seen the whole thing. So I still was not, I was 10 and I'm bright, but I didn't put it together. And she said, no, Jody, he shot himself. Um, and I said, oh, do we have gun, like, and then I was like, oh yeah, he came down the stairs and he had something behind him. And I didn't say this out loud, but then I started piecing it all together. Uh, then I heard, so I will say little pictures have big ears. So do not forget that your children
Mm-hmm.
hear a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
I heard a lot of things in other rooms that I suspect I was not supposed to hear. Um, so the priest that had come over from our church was having a conversation with my mom, and I guess they were already starting to talk
Mm-hmm.
about services and burials. And at that point, I heard him say, I don't think we'll be able to do it. And there was a conversation about not being able to do a funeral at the church, um, and whether he could preside over the burial. I mean, I didn't know at that point what anything was, but I remember feeling like, why would he say that? And hearing enough to know he was judging a sin. I, we weren't terribly religious. My father was Catholic. His parents were Catholic. He was an only child. His parents came over from Italy through Ellis Island at the age of 16. It was their one brilliant child they had. Um, and they were Catholic. So I remember thinking that was the first time I was like, ooh, daddy did something bad. Something bad. Like there was something bad that happened in this house. And I'm still thinking, are they doing surgery? Like, is he dead? Um, and so I heard the doorbell ring, people were coming in, and I heard someone say, I'm so sorry, hugging my mom saying, I'm so sorry about Mario. I'm so sorry you lost him. And then I was like, oh, he must have died. I wonder if he died during surgery. Like, I didn't quite know. Again, people didn't know what to do with me. I don't think,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah,
a,
but still, I like what you say when you're talking to adults and trying to, and this is why you're here, and I really admire you for that. You're here to help parents to understand, I mean, how to deal with kids in situations like that. And it doesn't even have to be suicide, but loss and grief and death. And what you're saying is, you may believe that you're hiding, but they're listening. Is that what you're trying to say? I mean, there are many things,
yeah.
and you pick up things from all kinds of people and in all kinds of even facial expressions, all of that. You
Yes.
notice it all, although everyone thought that they were doing a good job of maybe protecting you.
And the problem was I had no frame of reference. So what you're talking about, like a facial expression, I'm interpreting it as something totally different than it was in the adult world. And in my
Mm-hmm.
mind, all I'm thinking is I have to get upstairs to get that record that I stole from my sister's room back in her room so they don't discover my theft, which is just nuts now looking back on it. The whole thing, just bizarro. But um, so my uncles flew in. We all slept in the living room that night. I didn't know if I was allowed upstairs. I didn't know what was going on with the bedding or anything. And then they kept me downstairs and I wasn't allowed to go upstairs. And then I guess it was time for the wake was starting a few days later. And it was a very big deal that I go to the wake for everybody. So I knew that. And there was talk about what I was going to wear, when I was going to go, who was going to take me. And I wasn't understanding at all what was happening. Like somebody said, oh, it's when friends get together, to say they're sorry to you. So they brought me over. I walked in the room and it was an open casket, which is horrific. I want you to know, for a child.
Mm. Wow.
I,
Yeah.
I to this day will not walk in a room with an open casket. I won't do it. But everybody fell silent. Like I walk in and it's like, whoosh, like nothing. And everybody's watching me. And I still don't get it. I still don't get that I'm the kid who saw something bad, and there's
Mm-hmm.
something about me now. Now I'm like, they all know I
Because everyone
killed
is
him,
looking at
or
you.
I'm a
Yeah.
suspect, or am I going to kill them? Like, of course, I wasn't getting it. And then they said, okay, Jody, go up and see the body. And I'm thinking, why would I go? Like, what? All right. But I was an obedient child. So I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Walked up. There's a kneeling stool. I knelt on it. I was too small. So then I couldn't see over the thing. So I'm like, well, I guess I'll stand on the stool. So I'm looking at my father. And of course, I go to where I had seen the blood in the circle. And I was just staring at it like, I don't think this is his body. Like, there's a hole in his body, and thinking they switched out the body. They switched out the body. I didn't know that you could clean up bodies or fix bodies. But then I'm convinced, like, you guys don't know this, but this is like a mannequin. Maybe that's what they do, put mannequins in. So I looked at him, and I just thought it was weird. I didn't get it. Um, Not a sound in the room. Not a sound. Everybody's just watching me. I didn't cry. I just looked at him. I turned around. Um, I walked up to my uncle or my mom. I said, "Can I go now?" Like, I felt like I was brought there to do something, and I did it for them. I started to walk out, and a woman approached me that I've never seen, and she said, "I'm so sorry. I just wanted to say that. I'm so sorry." And I was like, "Thank you. That seems very, very nice of
And
you."
you're still trying to understand what people are so sorry about, right? Because
Right.
there's
Like,
just
I'm
so much
not.
confusion. Yeah.
And then I said to my mom as we walked past her, I said, "Who is that?" And she said, "It's your father's first wife." What? What are you talking about? Daddy was married before? Like, what's happening? Like, I felt like
Wow.
I was
That's too
in the
much.
Twilight
Yeah.
Zone.
Mm-hmm.
But so then I'm obsessed with that. But um, so then I'm still waiting to be arrested. I know it's coming. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in the house with checking mail. And I went to get the mail one day, and there was a letter my father had written to himself. It was his return address, but he had very distinctive handwriting that was all capitals. And I thought, oh, Daddy wrote a letter. Like, isn't that nice? So I walk in, I said, all the adults were, in this scrum discussing things. And I said, hey, Daddy wrote a letter to us. Oh my gosh. Everybody standing up, flipping out, took the letter, pushing me away, getting me out of the room. So I knew there was something big in the letter. I had overheard that there was something in the bedside table that was ripped up, some sort of note that was in tatters and ripped up. I didn't find out till, gosh, I'm 52. I probably didn't ask my mom about it till I was 40.
Yeah,
I so
that's what happens with suicide. There's so many secrets, so many unsaid things, and
yeah,
so much silence, right? That's
yeah.
what makes it even worse.
But somehow we were allowed to go to the church. We had the ceremony, and then we went to the gravesite. I will say this to parents. I don't know if it's me in particular, but as a child, it was very important I had something solid. The coffin, a grave, a headstone. Because later I could go to that and it was
Mm-hmm.
real. Um, so sometimes you don't process things till later. And that meant
Mm-hmm.
a lot to me to have a place to go.
To go, yeah.
I didn't realize it at the time, but I'm very pro places like cemeteries.
Mm-hmm.
And especially as a child of suicide who, I don't know, doesn't understand, that's a place my father was.
Mm-hmm.
So I would consider that as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So many odd things went through my mind, but I had to go back to school. I was starting fifth grade. The other odd thing that happened right then was I had a diving meet. I was a very good athlete, and I was supposed to compete for my country club as their top diver. I don't know who made the decision, but someone made the decision I should go to the meet. I think it was within about 24 to 36 hours after my father died. Um, and I remember walking in the country club with my Uncle Sterling, and I didn't know anybody knew. I was getting that something was bad. And again, I walked in and it was like whoosh, silence and everybody looking at me. So I knew I was that kid. I was that
Mm,
kid that something that I'm associated with something bad, something bad. I don't, it was just something bad about me all of a sudden. So I went and I took some practice dives, and someone came up, one of the girls came up and said, "Hey, are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they said, "I heard about your father." And my instinct was, "How did you hear about my father?" I had no idea. You know, I didn't know people talk or it's big news. And my parents were, you know, they were pretty up there socially. So I'm sure there was a lot of talk about it. So
mm-hmm.
after that, I took a dive and I got out of the pool and I said to my coach, "I'm going to go home." And my coach was like, "Okay." I'm sure my coach didn't think I would come. I walked up to my Uncle Sterling and said, "I want to go home." Um, I just, nobody talked to me about that.
Yeah,
I didn't know
yeah.
what to say.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to call you Jody, okay?
Yes, yes, of
Okay,
course.
so I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of the things we know is that it's important to be upfront. It's important to ask questions, not just this, oh, how are you doing that everybody does, but how are you feeling? How can I help you? And also, you mentioned decisions. It's so important to include kids in decisions. So, for example, it would have been much better for you if someone had come to you and said, "Do you want to see your daddy? Do you want to see the body?" Or whatever is age appropriate. But to help you make that decision. Same thing with the diving thing. Do you want to go diving? How do you feel about that? And not just say, "Okay, you go." It's not about adults. And I know that we do this with the best of intentions, but it's not about adults making all the decisions for the kid in a time like that. I know it's a very hard time to even think about decisions, but involve the kid, talk to them, listen to what they have to say, and let them make the decisions themselves with you, because
Yeah,
otherwise it's too confusing. I mean, everything is already too much for a child, and everything that you experienced was for sure. So it's a good thing that you bring it up, and we can help parents, think of how to deal with situations like that. And I want to go back to what you told me when you wrote to me, Jody, about how it defined you. What do you mean
yes.
by that? I mean, how long did it take you, for example, to ever bring it up? And when did that happen? Because it seems like everything was very secretive, right? All you knew was that something wrong had, something very bad your dad had done. And of course, there was the religious piece that didn't help. You were feeling guilty. You thought that the cops were going to arrest you. So, how did that impact your life, in your adult life and your relationships? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And it's not that it wasn't talked about, it's I heard it talked about and I had no frame of reference and couldn't
Mm-hmm.
process it. Um, when I say it defined me, it's the one thing that you cannot know me unless you know that about me. Um, so very few people know that about me. I'm a 52-year-old, on the surface, very funny, gregarious um, person. I don't think people would look at me and think of anything like this. And it's me. It defined everything after. it it was the defining moment of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So, and now looking back, I can see everything. The profession I'm in is because of that suicide at 10. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I try to save people. I stand with the people that are being shunned by society proudly and protect them from the system. I sit with them when they cry and their families when they cry, but trying to save people. It's anybody who's a public defender or criminal defense attorney has something. And I feel like if I can save someone, I'm saving my father. And it's not like it's that conscious, but it's clear to me. It's if I could save this person, it will fill the hole. If I can save this person. So I really think that children becomes saviors. Their goal is to save, to help. And the guilt now, knowing what I didn't know then, like, obviously I should have stopped him. I mean, as an adult, I'm like, Jody, you were there with him. Like, Daddy, what's behind your back? Grab the gun. Figure out this is odd. Like, stop it. I was the one with him and I should have stopped it. So that comes later. The stuff that comes later is he chose to leave this earth rather than be my father. He made that choice. So that carries you through. And the refrain for me became, I'm not good enough. And that carries through your whole life. That's the mantra. You're not good enough. And I can go through all the therapy you guys would want me to go through. And I can say, obviously, I know that's not true. But that's how it manifests in kids. It manifests in us that we're not good enough. And we weren't enough for someone to want to live, to be with us. It's the harshest rejection. It's an abandonment, and it rocks your sense of security. And I know my mom couldn't say I'll always be here because that's not true. She knew it wasn't true. But that one act of his suicide, it was everything. It was everything that came after in the definition of Jody. Very few people know my story who know me. I don't share it. I didn't share it with my kids. It's just, I don't know. I still feel bad. I feel it's too much. If people say, I say my father died when I was 10, and people are like, oh, that's so sad. And then some people say, how? And I say, he committed suicide. And it usually ends there. I rarely get to a piece of the conversation where people know I was there and I was alone. Because that's an element that then they look at you and they're thinking, wow, what's that about? That must have messed her up, or there's something. So it's still hard to bring up. I'll tell you, I can't see TV shows with guns in them. I turn away.
Really?
I can't, to this day, cannot see people being shot on TV. It manifests all the time. Not a day goes by that I don't think about it. I can remember that day crystal clear. I cannot remember anything before it. Cannot.
Really? So it shattered your memory from before.
Yeah. And I know I'm every therapist's dream. So if my mother recently died and I went to a therapist, and you go through your background and they get to my father and they're like, I mean, every therapist's dream is like, oh my gosh, like I never get these kids who witness a suicide, and have you gotten therapy? And it's kind of like, look, I'm 52. I'm not, I don't want to be unwoven, but therapists love that idea. Like, they want me to do the eye imaging thing to
Uh-huh.
get over the trauma. I don't even know what it is, or
EMDR. Yeah.
psychotherapy.
EMDR, yeah.
And it doesn't appeal to me to deconstruct. It doesn't appeal to me. But I know I'm every therapist's nightmare, especially because the rest of my life had so much trauma after that too. But I'm trying to think of what else I can tell parents. I know I went to school and it just was odd. I ran into, her name is Stephanie Malloy. Hi, Stephanie. But she was in the hallway and I said, hey, how was your summer? And she said, my dad died. And I was like, oh my gosh, this like,
Mm.
I don't want to be mean, but this is awesome. Like somebody else's dad died. I'm not alone. And I said, how did he die? And she said he had a heart attack at the bus stop. And then she said, how did your dad die? I was
Mm.
like, oh, like, I don't know what to say. I knew it was bad. So what do
Did
I
you
say?
use the word? I mean, did you know, even know the word? Because some families will say accident or
Yeah.
he was sick, but they won't use the word. Did you ever use the word?
I think I said he killed himself.
Okay.
And my mother was a psychiatric social worker, so she was very, like, she used words, and she started survivors of suicide groups for adults because there
Mm-hmm.
wasn't anything in 1978. Um, but I'm just saying to parents, it's different for kids. It's, we're not processing the shame. We're feeling it, but we don't know why. And it's coming at us, negativity, and we are not comprehending um, what,
Who
what's
was, yeah, who
happening.
was the first person you talked about this with?
Gosh, I don't know
Adult
that
life.
anybody was either even brave enough to ask me what happened in that room.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't know. I can't even tell you.
You told me about what happened one day. Maybe it was, I don't know if it was the first time you talked about this with your kids. I think
Well,
it
I
was,
didn't. I didn't talk about it with my kids. So my mom was alive. Obviously, I don't have a dad around, and my husband has two parents who are very active and alive. My mother's very active in their life growing up. I had taken time off work and was a stay-at-home mom. My oldest son never asked about it. I have not one picture in my house of my father, my family. I have pictures of my mom. I don't have one picture of him. I have pictures of his parents, but I don't have a picture of my father. Um, and so I think my daughter, we were in our minivan because everybody has a minivan. And my daughter said, where's your daddy? I was like literally wanted to jump out of the minivan. And I said, oh, sweetie, he died. How'd he die? And nope, nope, not going to answer it. And I didn't want my kids to think that was something, because as a child of someone who committed suicide, it's an option. Your parent has taught you this is an option. When things are tough, when you're hurting, here's an option. Like my father killed himself. So that's always on the table for a child of suicide. I mean, I'm very blunt about it. That's reality. I didn't even want my kids to know people could kill themselves, right? So I went home and I said to my husband, you have to tell them I can't do it. Um, and I thought they would hate me,
oh, I'm
but
sorry.
it's okay. But they came in, they said, Mommy, we love you. We're sorry your father was in so much pain. So they were sweet, and that kind of healed me. But to think at that age that I didn't want to bring that into their lives. There's still a shame, and there's something, like if he had cancer, I would just said he has cancer. But that it was a taking of a life and it was brutal. Um, And I really didn't talk to them about me being there or seeing it. I don't, it's just not part of the dialogue for me.
Mm-hmm.
But
Jody, what made you decide to, because you're going from I never talk to anyone, even to my
yeah,
kids about this. What made you decide to openly talk about your father's suicide?
you mean with you?
Yeah, I feel very honored, I have to say.
Oh,
Thank
um,
you.
well, I listen to your podcast, and there are very few I hear anywhere about a child's point of view and a child who's seen it, um, and kind of explain. You can, as adults and therapists, you can look down and say they're going to feel abandoned, they're going to feel this, but from the child's point of view and how fragmented it is, and I don't know that kids can put it together, even if you tell them. I don't know that they can. And you had a guest on, oh no, I think you were talking about it a week or two ago. You said, yeah, I go and I speak to other doctors about suicide and explain and teach them. And I was thinking they should have kids like me who actually have gone through it talk to them and ask me questions, because they're learning from a very detached, non-personal, non-realistic way. My sister was 16. She went through it extremely differently than I did. My brother was 17 going on 18. Extremely different reaction. Different ages have different reactions. Different personality types have different reactions. Um, but we pick things up, and it's important. You guys labeled, I'm saying you guys as therapists and psychoanalysts and stuff, you label them and want us to understand them, but we feel them, we just haven't put a name on it yet, if that makes sense. um,
It happens much, much later.
yeah.
Did you talk to your siblings about it? Did they talk to you?
um, no, I don't. Not really. My sister kind of hid away in her room. She read a lot. She loved Wuthering Heights, and she was the one that would retreat into her room. My brother was the man of the household, but
Mm.
he went to Exeter and Princeton. He had been gone since I was 7. And so it really was just me and my mom. My sister went to college, soon after. So everybody knew it about me, but I didn't. It was just like a fact people knew about Jody Pesaresi. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's a kid who, and that's how I always felt
Yeah.
it was. Like when I left the room, that's what was said
Mm-hmm.
forever. So when I grew up, I went to school. I went to Brown. Why would I tell anybody that? Why would I want that to be part of my narrative? I go to law school. Why would I want that to be part of my narrative? That I found him. It's hard enough to tell people he's committed suicide. And my nirvana moment for me came probably mid 20s, early 20s. And when you're raised in chaos, you seek chaos because that's your comfort level. And I had been raised in a chaotic household for other reasons too, after my father died. And I had this nirvana moment of, I didn't choose any of that. I didn't choose for my father to die. I didn't choose for my mother to have all the issues she did after she died that I had to deal with. But I can choose now. My life is my choices now. Before it was adults, they made choices and I had to react. But this is me now. And I can't blame it on anybody else. I can't. So the choices from here on in belong to me. And so many people get stuck blaming parents or analyzing it, or like, I don't think my brother and sister ever got to that place. Never got to the out of the blame and they never got there. and they
So
never
that,
got to just,
how did it affect your family?
it destroyed it.
Oh.
Yeah. And that's why I say everybody reacts differently. Um, everybody reacts differently. I think part of the stuff that's interesting to me is my father was a child psychiatrist, one of the first ever. You know, people didn't do child psychiatry in 1978. He graduated Columbia in 3 years, went to medical school, was a head of psychiatry at Hackensack Hospital. He had been depressed. He had been very depressed. He was in a situation where he could not get help because he was a head of psychiatry.
Mm.
It was taboo. If my mom put him in that hospital, he would lose his job or be judged. He went to a private therapist, evidently, I found out later, but wouldn't take the medication. Um, so it was something that we couldn't even help heal because he was a child psychiatrist and the head of psychiatry. Um, the other thing is that to this day, I will never comprehend is as a child psychiatrist, really you choose when you're home with your youngest child to commit suicide? That's dumbfounding to me. Like, dumbfounding. Like, this is what you do. You would know. Why would you do that to a child? I will never be able to reconcile that. That was his
Mm-hmm.
specialty. And he
Mm-hmm.
had to know,
It,
But
it
that's how much
it
pain.
just shows, right, on how out of your mind and constricted your mind is in moments like that, of that much pain, that
So
you
much
really
pain.
don't think, yeah, you really don't
And
think
that made me
rationally.
realize that it was overwhelming,
Mm-hmm.
irrational pain. And he was in a tunnel at that point. Um, and then his parents, he was an only child. His parents were like a crosswalker for school buses and a seamstress. My nana also, made bread at a bakery, but they came over to America to have the American dream for their child. He had this beautiful education, and then he kills himself. I mean, I can't even imagine. um,
What they went through too,
I can't
yeah.
even imagine. And this is another thing about organized religion. When I went, my grandmother passed away. My grandfather passed away. I was in high school. Then my grandmother passed away, and I went to help clean out her apartment. And under her bed was a beautiful box. It was beautifully kept, obviously a treasure, had a little blue box, and it had a blue tie on it. And I'm thinking, is this going to be pictures of my father? Is this like, what could she treasure so much? I opened it, and in it was every year since my father died from 1978, she had got a letter from the Catholic Church they had gone to in Union City, New Jersey, that said, "We are praying for your son in purgatory," every year.
Oh
And she
my
kept them,
gosh.
and my grandmother kept them and cherished
Can you
them.
imagine
So
the shame? I mean, if as if it's not enough, right?
it's so organized religion, I just don't get. I don't get it. I believe in spirituality and love and connecting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get the box of organized religion because that was a lady who had one child. Why
Mm.
would you do that?
Yeah, yeah, and I've heard also of people who lost loved ones to say, "I lost my church. I lost them. The community is just not there anymore." And it's really sad because that's when you need comfort and community the most, right? I
Yeah,
do believe, Jody, in I want to get maybe a special on religion and talk to representatives of religion, like leaders, because I do think it's changing.
yeah,
It has been changing in the last few years. There's a lot of campaigning about suicide and awareness, and I think that has had an impact. And I'm just hoping it does, because I do get I get a lot of horror stories when it comes to organized religion.
Yeah. Yeah, my interaction was not good, and it just
Mm,
got reinforced when I found that. Um,
yeah.
so
Jody,
I
thank
I
you.
don't know.
Thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
I know it wasn't easy, especially you haven't shared this with anyone. It is something that you always kept inside of you. And unfortunately, it was, as you said, so definitive, and it really defined some choices in your life. And I just feel so honored that you chose to share this with my audience, because they need to hear from the point of view of a child. They need to hear from a point of view of showing that there are people like you that, although went through hell like you did in this experience, you're still here trying to help others. So that says a lot about you, and it says a lot about that child who wanted to protect your siblings and your mom, and who never shared the messages your father made you promise to share, because you knew it would hurt them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's who you are.
Well, I
You're
hope
a
I
treasure.
at least reach out enough to tell therapists and parents, kids are different. They're different. And
Mm-hmm.
I hope that studies are done with adult children like me who've been through it, because your mind is not able to process it and has no frame of reference. So there's got to be a different approach, and we've got to be given the tools to deal with going out in the world and having people get silent and look at us. And it's a it's a thing. So hopefully it will get better. It's been many years now. We're still talking about it, right?
Yeah, we will always talk about it. And I think from a place of healing, it's good
Yeah.
that we do.
Yes.
And I hope this conversation has helped you
It has. I
somewhat. Yeah.
appreciate it. I still haven't met another person who witnessed their parents' suicide, but one of these days, maybe I will.
Hmm. Well, maybe start a group. I'm sure there are many people like you out there who need this kind
Yeah.
of support group.
Yeah.
Think
I
about
bet we
that.
are very much the same too. I'm
Think about
interested to
that.
see.
Yeah. Well, do
Yeah.
you want to say where you can be found? Maybe someone who is listening right now went through the same thing, and maybe they want to contact you, and who knows, you can start this group together, right? So
Yeah, I'd
how
love
can
to
they
do
find
that.
you? How can they find
So,
you?
should I just give my email, or is that weird? Online?
Your
No.
website, I guess, because
Yeah.
there's a way
So
to contact you through there, right?
yeah, I have my own law group now. It's called Hallam Law Group, Hallam. So I have my own website. You can Google Josephine Hallam, and I will come up in Phoenix, Arizona. Do not call me to represent you, because you're in a lot of trouble if you call me for that. But if you
Well,
want to
I
reach
know if I
out,
ever get in trouble, I hope I don't. I will call you just.
no, you're looking at life in prison then. But
Oh no, thank you. Then no.
and if you feel like you want an adult to interact with your child, um, just so they know, like, look, I'm great. I have a great life, and this made me, but it actually made me help people and beautiful and strong. Um, so
Mhm.
if you
Yeah.
want that as a parent, or your child who's witnessed a suicide and want to talk or get a little group going, I'm here.
I would, yeah. I'm sure you would be a great facilitator for the group. Thank you.
All right.
I'll make sure I have your website too on my notes. So if people want
Okay.
to contact you, they will. I'm sure they will, because there's so many people listening. We have more than people from over 80 countries now listening to this.
Wow. Well, you're impressive, and thank you for doing your work and letting people like me and such a multitude of viewpoints come in, because we're all different, experience it differently,
Mhm.
and the more awareness there is of that, the better therapies and help and support there can be. So thank you for
Thank
your work. I
you.
appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Okay.